started. I'm Maryanna Korwitts, and I'm going to be talking with you today about the power of names. Every one of you has one. You've had one since birth. Some of you have gone through some name changes. Of course, women, when they get married, go through some name changes. But that name is affecting you on levels that you probably never even imagined. We tend to, in our society, take a look at names as labels. It's a handy way to get someone's attention, to differentiate one person from the other. But the thing you may not realize is your name is affecting you on a subliminal basis. It's actually setting up a magnetic charge around you that is attracting the relationships in your life, the type of job or career that you choose to do, the amount of money that you're making, the traits that you're expressing in your life, the dominant traits, those that aren't so dominant. It's like a force field around you, very much like music playing. A little bit about my background. I used to teach, and I also have done some graduate work in psychology. I was always really interested in how we behave, why we behave the way we do, and always looking for ways of predicting human behavior. And I discovered when I looked at psychology that almost everything out there is subjective. So that means you can do a Rorschach test with somebody. They're all going to have different answers, or they're going to skew those responses in a way that's very personal. I was looking for something that was objective across the board, so always the same no matter what. When I was teaching, I noticed that children with the same names were very similar. And at first, I thought it was my imagination. But then every class list in September, I'd take a look and I'd search for certain names that I was hoping were not there. Because I knew that those students were likely to be trouble. And those of you, anyone here that has been a teacher? Anyone here that can relate to certain names being very much related to personality traits? Well, I started talking to my colleagues, and I actually set up little profiles and said, tell me the names that are the kids that aren't so organized. Who are the shy ones? Who are those that are the talkers, the ones that get out of their seats very restless? And the same names were appearing on those lists. So I knew I was onto something. And from there, what I did is I started studying ancient tradition. And I realized that going back in history, almost every one of the ancient languages was alphanumeric. That means there was a number associated with every letter or character in the alphabet. And what that allowed to happen was that names could be established according to patterns. And so if you wanted to establish a particular pattern in a name, you just had to put a certain set of numerical codes together, and that name would resonate on that energetic level. Just about every language had that component. I have a good friend who is a composer, and he told me that in classical music, the same thing applied. Musical patterns were applied to classical music according to the vibrational energy that the composer wanted to express. People like Bach and Beethoven, not only did they express certain patterns in music, but there were certain ones that were banned. One of those that was banned is the pattern that we see in rock music today, because it was known that that pattern tends to be discordant with the human energy field. Bach and Beethoven often would sign their work with the mathematical pattern present in the music. People don't know that. It's hidden. It's behind the scenes. So when I realized that and I started looking at names a little more closely, I realized that those patterns behind the scenes were actually creating this subliminal effect that affects our energy field. Now, Dr. Emoto is speaking here this weekend. And is there anyone here that's not familiar with his work? Okay, he is a scientist from Japan who was working with the quality of water and wanting to improve the quality. And he did a little experiment where he took words, wrote different phrases or words on pieces of paper, applied those to beakers, and this was a blind study, and then he let those names or words stay on the beakers for a while, and then his assistants would freeze the water and they would take pictures of the crystals. And what they found was that each one of these different patterns would create different words would create different patterns. The very positive words, beautiful patterns that would coordinate well, looked really wonderful. Those that were things like hate created patterns that were all chaotic. We're all 80% end up water, correct? And so if we're taking one word and we're applying that word to us on a daily basis with what we say, what we do, what we think, what we write, that name, that word actually becomes a part of our vibrational energy. It starts to affect us. I talked with a Hawaiian researcher a few years back, and he said the experimentation that he's doing is actually proving that names will affect our DNA. So how important is that name? Your first name affects your everyday personality to a very large degree, that pattern behind the scenes. Your middle name affects your self-image. Your surname affects everyone in the family, joins everyone in the family with this bond. Now, in times past, the surname would actually represent the family trade. So if someone were a blacksmith, the name would be embedded with all the traits that went well to make a blacksmith successful. The children would have that surname. They would feel, gee, it feels really good to be a blacksmith. And before you know it, they were following in Dad's footsteps. Sometimes the surname would represent an area where a family lived. It would actually carry the energy of that area. And what would happen is people wouldn't want to leave. So if their name were such and such Green Meadow, they'd all want to stay living in the Green Meadow. And it would keep people bonded. Now today we don't have that quality anymore. We certainly have surnames, but they don't relate to our traits. They don't relate to areas. But they still bond everyone in the family.